All right, y'all. Romance back up in action, man. I'm bringing the show. Today's going to be part 6 of the Celts. I know my history shows might be a little bit boring, or at least I don't get a lot of love on them, a lot of likes or comments. But I'm going to keep doing these, man. I love doing these history shows, and this Celt one has been kind of like, it wasn't like I've been doing it like once at one every week. So please bear with me. This series means a lot to me, and it has been hard. It has. I know a shit ton of stuff about the Celts, but I want to make sure everything's right. I'm coming to you live from Yancey's office today, over at Franceland, and today we're going to be. On the last show I discussed, that was part 5. We discussed Caesar's conquest of Gaul and Vercingetorix trying to unite the Celtic tribes and fight against them. He almost did it. He almost beat Caesar. This is Julius Caesar, one of the greatest conquerors in history. The Celts lost, and pretty much from that point on, the Gaul, the like, from this point, Caesar conquers Gaul from 58 to 50 BC. He's murdered by his own senators in 44 BC. Pretty much from 50 BC onward, like, yes, most of what is now France was still Celtic people, but and they called themselves Gauls, but they were now under Roman occupation, and slowly but surely Romans would colonize. Germans moved in. Germans took over what was now Germany, and they moved Celts westward. By this point on, the Celts have all of what I'm talking about Celtic wise from this point on in the show, go moving forward, is all in the British Isles. They are no longer on continental Europe, at least not as nations of Celts. So at this point, we're going to move on. Now, Caesar also tried to conquer, when he was conquering Gaul, he did take a whack. I think it was like in 50, like the third or fourth year of his conquest. He was way up north, and he's like, why don't we go try to sack Britain? And he landed on the island, and there was a lot of resistance, and he was just like, fuck, like before he even dug his heels into the British soil, he was like, fuck this noise. This is crazy. Romans hate the ocean. Romans aren't really that good with boats and navigating and fighting naval warfare. They were an infantry-based army, and they liked to keep it that way. All right, so they liked legions. They liked having guys on foot with shields and swords. The boat thing they didn't do well, and definitely having to like move the whole logistics of moving armies from across the English Channel, from land on a boat back on land. Then Caesar wasn't with it. So almost 100 years goes by, and slowly the Romans are like, Roman culture is trickling into Celtic Britain. Okay, Romanization has become the way that Americanization happens. The way that like Pakistanis hate us, but they like have DVDs of The Godfather and shit in their own language, in their little caves that they live in and shit, and their goat herding tribes and over there. Like, that's the way that like it, not just in Britain but all over the world, people were cashing in. People want to eat McDonald's and wear blue jeans now all over the world. That's called Americanization. Well, that type of people wanted to have olive oil and Roman baths and shit, and all the fixings that came with Romanization. So little by little, especially the rich were starting, in the rich Celts and like the leaders of tribes and so forth, and merchant stuff, they were starting to get into Roman culture. They were starting to accept Romanization, some of them. But the Celts were divided, and Celtic people are sticks in the mud mentally. I'm one of them, so they're stubborn. So they didn't. A lot of tribes didn't accept it, and there was fighting amongst the Celts about it. And again, Britain was not a cohesive one big nation of Celts. It was many, many, many tribes. It was a lot like the way the Indians were when the Americans got to America, or when the Europeans got to America. So Caesar was 48 BC. Now, in almost 100 years go by, and then now, see, Julius Caesar, we all know him, okay? And then he got murdered, and then there was a lot of fighting for a couple years, and then eventually, and I think it was in like 30 BC or 26 BC, the Emperor Augustus comes on the scene, and he was a pretty good emperor as far as running the empire. He had his shit together. He was a pretty great emperor. Okay, he was probably one of the best. He was even better emperor than Caesar was. But Augustus dies in like 4 A.D. Then you got Tiberius. Tiberius was kind of a nobody. Then there was somebody, an emperor, I think, named Gaius in there, and he was kind of like an unremarkable dude. He just was kind of a figurehead. And then we got the beginning of like where emperors really started becoming douchebags that like had no business being emperors. And the first one of this name was named Claudius. Okay, he was the 5th Roman emperor. He became Roman emperor in 43 A.D. And everybody knew he sucked. The Romans knew he sucked. The Senate knew he sucked. He had a lot to prove. And he like sat there and was like, how will I get big? How will I make everyone like me? And it dawned on him that if he could somehow conquer Britain, and do what Caesar couldn't do, then he would be somehow greater than Caesar. Everybody by now, 100 years later, everybody was on Caesar's dick. Like everyone was on Caesar's dick when he was alive, and 100 years later, it only grew bigger. You know what I'm saying? So he was trying to be, and Roman emperors would forever call themselves, all of them, all called themselves Caesar after Julius Caesar. Like it was that big of a deal. So somehow he got a few clients, like, and when tribes, like, were peaceful with the Romans and went along with what they said, and started like working with them and trading with them. They were called client tribes. And Claudius, there was already a couple client tribes going. There was, especially in the southeast of what is now Britain. And the Romans started building cities there too, even though they didn't conquer it yet. Anytime you see Cester on the end, there was Colchester, there was Chichester, there was just a place called Chester. There was a place called Camel-Dunham, which we'll get into later. But slowly but surely, the Romans are building cities. There was Bath. Bath was already a city, but the Romans kind of Romanized it because they were all in the bath. So, and there's a natural hot spring there that's really good for a bath. Anyway. So Claudius comes to Britain himself, like the emperor, like made this arduous journey to this like outlying region that he wanted to conquer, and he came there on it was a big, huge parade. He rode in on an elephant, like he was trying to wow and blow away the population into just succumbing to his majesty. And it sort of worked with a lot of the tribes that were down with Romanization and wanted to eat Roman bread and drink Roman wine and all that shit. But a lot of the Celtic tribes, especially outlying in the north and west, didn't want anything to do with this shit. So there was automatically fighting and problems and, issues. But anyway, this is going to be a long show today. I'm just warning you. I'm on minute 8 already and I haven't even begun. All right, so there was a son of a Roman soldier of Caesar who became the king of the Artovates tribe. His name was Vericum, and he was pro-Roman. The Romans named him Rex, okay, which was Rex was something that a Roman emperor will never call himself, but he will call lower people under him Rex, the kings. They called it. They called him Rex. He was on the Romans' dick, all right, and then slowly but surely they started, the Artovates tribe, which was pro-Roman, started having beef with a tribe called the Castellovillani tribe. I can't pronounce it, and these are all Romanized names of they probably weren't they didn't call themselves that in Celtic. They just that was just the Romanized name for them. So the Castellovillani tribe started to fight against the Romans, and there was one guy who he was born probably in 10 or 15, somewhere in there, A.D., and then by 40 A.D., his dad was actually the king of the Castellovillani tribe, and he was the one who first started breaking away, like the idea of like fighting back against the Romans, the resistance. His name was Cuno Bellenius. There is actually a Shakespearean tragedy about him. Shakespeare wrote a play about this guy. It's called Cymbeline, and it's one of the few Shakespearean plays that I've never. Unfortunately, I was forced to read it in college. I was forced to read everything by Shakespeare, but there was so much of it I like mushed my way through and read cliff notes and like just faked it and shit. And I never really read the play, which is a bummer to me. But anyway, the son of Cuno Bellenius, his name was Caractacus, and he ruled his tribe from like 40 to 50 A.D. And he fought back. He was going tit for tat against the British or against the Celts. Now the Celts, again, you're talking about like they were not organized. They did not have organized, like, it's not like every single guy that you're fighting on the Celtic side has the same shield or the same armor. It was like you make it yourself, you do it yourself. Where the Romans, it was like the U.S. Army. Like you were brought in, you were issued weapons, you were issued uniforms, you had to wear certain type of boots, you had to wear certain type of cape, you had to wear certain type of armor. That was just standard. So, and the Celts are fighting with spears. A lot of them had swords, and swords are great if you're one-on-one combat, but that's not, like, swords is not the way to go in, like, mass fighting and, like, unit fighting, where the Romans they all had the same size shields, and they had one of the deadliest weapons in history is just a little simple short sword called the gladius. That's where the word gladiator comes from. That would just stick out from in between these shields. And I'm telling you, it was when the Roman legions formed up and they formed into what's called the testudo or the turtle. You just couldn't break them, man. It was the mightiest infantry in military history. So even though this Caractacus guy, like, he was bouncing all over the place. First he was fighting, most of where the Roman occupation was again in southeast Britain, but they were moving all over. They wanted to conquer all of Britain, so they went north, and they went into west, into Wales. They went into what's now Cornwall, and we'll get into Cornwall in the next show. But he was fighting this guerrilla war, and he was kind of winning. And then everything met ahead at a little bit north of what's now like where like London is now, a couple, like maybe 100 miles north. There was a place called a battle at the Battle of Medway, where Caractacus fought against the Romans and lost. Okay, he fought against a dude named Publius Astorius Scapula, who was a total dickhead. And he was like hell bent on like subduing the Celts. Fuck him. And even though he lost in the Battle of Medway, the Romans used this as after the Battle of Medway, like it was on. Like there was no more being nice. The Romans started like occupying and like pillaging and raping and ruthlessly putting down any insurrection that the Celts did in Britain. So Caractacus, he fights at the Battle of in Wales. He loses another battle at a battle called the Caradoc. And anytime you see Caer, Caer in the beginning of a Roman or a Celtic place name, that means tower. Anytime you see the word Dun, D-U-N, that means fort. Okay, London was the fort of Lud. He was a British/Welsh hero of legend, and legend has it that he was told by the gods to form a city in the exact center of his territory, and that's what London was. So anyways, eventually he's in the north. This Caractacus guy goes north, and he's with a tribe called the Brigantes. And I think that the Brigantes they're named after the goddess Bridget, and I believe that's where the name Britain comes from. But anyway, he's in the North Midlands. We don't really know what the North Midlands are here in America, but in Britain they probably know what the hell that is. And a queen of the Brigantes named Cartamandua was her name. She was like, look, man, you can keep fighting against these guys, but like, reality is reality. These Romans are going to take us over, and fuck it. They got wine, they got all kinds of technology, they got good bread, olive oil, all the shit we want and need. You know, I mean, like, they didn't have cable TV or porno yet, but like, it was that equivalent. Like, the Romans just had it all. So it was like, you know what, dude, you're causing all kinds of problems. She got this Caractacus guy, and so put him in chains and handed him over to the Romans. Okay, and it was weird because he got, like, the way that Vercingetorix got captured by Caesar, and then he was like a prisoner for years, and then he was paraded in a triumph. He was like in chains, and, you know, paraded around Rome, and then he was murdered in front of the Roman populace, you know, executed. That is what they wanted. That's what Claudius wanted to do to this Caractacus guy. But while he was in Rome as a prisoner, he made this speech. The last thing they let him do was, they said, "Do you have any last words?" And he said, "Yeah, I have some last words, man. What the hell do you... This Rome is great. Look at this great city. What the hell do you want with Britain? Our country sucks. And if you would have just came as like friends and not attacked us and like wouldn't have been dicks, we would have been peaceful and none of this shit would have happened." And somehow that argument like resonated. The Romans are suckers for good orators. So, like, anyone who can really like talk the talk, the Romans are always willing to listen. Okay, Caesar was an orator. Every emperor had to have orator skills. Cicero, Seneca, there was a million great Roman orators. But anyways, he talked his way out of execution, and he lived the rest of his years as a slave in Rome, and they actually let him live. So at this point, I'm going to stop the show because we're on 17 minutes. I'm going to have to do a second part of this, the Roman occupation of Britain. Claudius dies, I believe, in like, I don't know, 53, 54 AD, and then we get the next emperor, who is Nero. Okay, oh boy, Nero, he sucked. If you don't already know about Nero, he's the guy that set Rome on fire and played his fiddle while it was burning. He's also the guy who made his horse a senator. You know what I'm saying? Like, Nero was all fucked up. But that's going to be the end of the show for today. The next show we're going to get into, we're going to stay on the British resistance against the Roman occupation, and we're going to get into the Iceni tribe and Queen Boudicca. But since this show is so long today, I'm not going to continue it. You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to keep going. All right. So anyway, dude gets... Nero becomes emperor. The Celts, most of these tribes are subdued and are willing to go along with Roman, at least most of the important tribes are willing to go along with Roman occupation. Well, there was one tribe that was, they were called the Iceni, okay? And they were cool with the Romans. But the king of the Iceni, whose name I couldn't find it, and I apologize for it, but the king of the Iceni tribe dies, okay? And in his will, he leaves his tribe and everything that he owned to his two daughters and the Roman emperor. Well, that didn't sit well, that didn't read well, and that didn't jive with the Roman emperor and the Roman, like, military, okay? So they used that, and the Romans would use any flimsy excuse they could to say. That's what republics do. I say it over and over. The republics will use any... America does it all the time. You have one ally, you have another ally, one of them pisses the other ones off, and then you attack one, and then you can use it as an excuse. So they use this whole reason that he willed his shit to his daughters and not the emperor first, as an excuse to, like, go in and conquer that territory. And when they did, they, like, the Romans went, like, again, they were sick of this shit. They were sick of these Celts giving them problems. So they started, like, going into houses and taking everything of value and raping the women and beating the women. And the two biggest prizes of this, well, the three, was this guy, this king who just died and willed it to his daughters. The Roman general who was in charge of this, his name was Paulinus. He personally raped both of the daughters that were willed this territory. And they whipped and flogged and beat and raped their mother. Now, their mother is, who was the queen of the Iceni, and I guess, kind of reigning at this point since her husband died. Her name was, the Romans call her Boudicca. Her real Celtic name is Boudicca. Now, I wanted to name my daughter either of those two names, but I was told that it sounds too much like a black person's name. I know that sounds racist, but it is kind of true. Like, if I name my child Boudicca, every black person I ever met would be like, yo, your daughter's black. Oh, it does sound like a black name, but Boudicca is the Celtic name of her. And so she started, she was like, no. We're fighting the fuck back against them. We're having a war council. Fuck the Romans. We're going to get our land back. We're getting them the fuck out of here. So for the next year, she held a war council, and all of the Celtic tribes who were against Rome, which there still was many of, got together. And even some of the ones that were down with Rome were still called, and they still were like, all right, this is going too far. We're going to fight back. Fuck the Romans. And for the next year, they didn't even bother farming. They didn't even bother building shit. All they did was make war materials, spears, swords, armor, the whole nine, chariots. And so Paulinus was this Roman governor. While she was preparing for war, he thought everything's cool. But he also wanted to take out the Druids. Now, what are the Druids? The Celts in Gaul and definitely in Britain had this priest class. There were priests, there were the politicians, there were the lawyers, and there were the men of science. There were also the historians. The Celts kind of fucked up as a people because they put all their eggs in one basket mentally by really the priest class, the Druids, had all the knowledge. They thought that it was sacrilegious to write shit down, so they didn't write anything down. The Druids remembered. You had to be a Druid. You had to remember all of your history. If you ever wonder what a Druid looks like, you're looking at one. I am a Druid. Druids had to study for 20 years. Druids had to be versed in poetry. Druids had to be versed in literature. Druids had to know every one of the sagas of their past and their history. I know all that shit. I've been practicing for years. I'm a low-level Druid. I can't, supposedly Druids could sink ships with their rhyme skills. Supposedly Druids could set fire to armies with their rhyme skills. I don't have that. I'm not a powerful Druid. Druids could talk to all animals and plants. I can't talk to plants, or at least they don't talk back. And I can't talk to wild animals. Wild animals always get pissed and either run away or come at me. But domesticated animals I'm pretty good with talking, like cats and dogs and shit like that, and hamsters. I got some Druid skills, okay? But anyway, this Paulinus wanted to take out the Druids. And the most holy place, Islam has Mecca, Judaism has Jerusalem, Christianity has Rome. For Druidism and for the Celtic religion, the holiest place in the world for them was in Wales. It's called the island of Anglesey, and that's where Paulinus, he sent 4 legions there to attack there and to wipe these guys out. He figured, once I take out their religious center, they'll lose their identity and they'll become Romanized, and this shit will be over. So they marched to this island of Druids, and there's no warriors. There's hardly any Celtic warriors there. There's just Druids. There's female Druids that are in the front lines, and all they're doing is they're holding a bunch of torches, fire, and then behind them is the Druid men, okay, who are all standing on this big, huge pile of wood, and the Romans are like, what the, and they're like, what the fuck is going on? And these women come at them and start waving these torches, doing screaming and going all crazy and dancing and shit like that. Paulinus is like, all right, the Roman troops are like, what the fuck is this? They're just trying to process all this shit. Paulinus is like, cut the bullshit, attack. So they attack and they slaughter all these women with torches. And they realize, all right, behind them is all the male druids standing on this big pile of wood. Here, it's a funeral pyre, okay? And as the Romans were attacking, somehow they just lit themselves on fire, and what it was a mass sacrifice, human sacrifice, and that freaked the Romans out. And like from then on, for the next part of this story, like bad shit keeps happening to the Romans. The Romans were all freaked out by this, and like Roman statues in Roman cities started falling down by themselves. Like people started getting diseases. Like bad shit started happening after this happened. But they're still in Wales. They're all the way to the west of Britain. Back in the east of Britain, where the Iceni tribe is, they're getting ready for war. They're the Boudicca's like organizing and getting ready to like attack. So the first place, and the place where the battle where that happened is on a place called Iona or Mona. I don't know. Somehow I got the same name for both of these places. For the two different names for the same place that almost sound alike. But on Anglicely, where that battle happened, it was called the Battle of Mona or Iona. I can't figure out which one it is. But while they're away, Boudicca marches on a city called Camaldunum. Okay, wipes the city out. There was only just a few skeleton crew of Romans there. They got their ass handed to them. Somehow they were like in a temple or a church or whatever, and the church got surrounded. The Celts just burned the shit to the ground. Anyone who was loyal to Romans, and especially they were hard on women. For some reason, they impaled all these women and cut off their breasts and sewed them to their faces. Like it was really, really weird and debauched and violent what the Celts did. And that was city number one, okay? Now, city number two, she keeps going, all right? Boudicca is on fire, bro. And they don't have a lot of horses. The Celts are known for fighting in chariots, but at this point, they're, like, low on horses, so they're mostly on infantry. Boudicca, so she marched on the next city she attacked was Londinium. London itself, she completely burned it to the ground. I know it's hard to imagine. Wait, she attacked London. London's a major city. It wasn't that big back then. It was more like a little fortified village, but she served their ass on a platter, and the same thing happened there. Murder, impaling. They started crucifying people like Romans. Like that was something that was a statement. Like to crucify a Roman, oh shit, like that was some real serious shit. All right, then there was a city called Verulamium, and at this point, like Paulinius had already come back, and he only had one legion. He came to Verulamium, and she knew he was there, and so all the Celts came at that city. And then he ran. He got the hell. He got out of Dodge, and they destroyed that city too, and all the loyal Romans. And at this point, Boudicca's large. Her army is swelling everywhere she's going. People are joining her ranks. We're getting the fucking Romans out of here. That's what was the Celtic like cry. And again, Boudicca, she was the symbol of Britain, bro. She had red hair, green eyes. She was big, long, flowing fucking locks of braids of hair. She'd go into battle, and supposedly like one of her breasts was always showing and shit like that while she was fighting. Like she was wild and crazy and everything that you imagine about the Celts, man. I really loved this chick. She was you want to talk about strong women in history, this was one of them, okay? This is a very strong woman in history. She almost took out the Romans. So, all right, so she's following Paulinius. And again, we're talking about people like you're going a professional army, the Romans, a non-professional army, kind of a ragtag thing that is just like a mob. It's what the Celts are. So they're just coming at them. And Paulinius, since he's on the run, he got to choose. A lot of times when you're being chased in military, at least in old school military, you can choose which ground you fight on. So he found this place in between where two forests. There was just a little clearing in between two forests, and that's where he fortified. So he had good ground. They formed up the Roman legion. He had one legion. He had like 10,000 guys, and the Celts had like 80,000 guys, and they were just. The Romans did their testudo. They put all their shields up, then put their shields over their head. They were like repelling all the arrows and somehow fighting back and standing their ground. And the Celts were just coming at them like waves onto the rocks on the shore, and they were losing. They were getting their ass beat. They were one by one getting decimated by the Romans, and because he had the superior ground and the testudo formation, Polinius ended up winning the day. Eventually, the Celts were breaking rank all over again. They didn't have their main weapon of choice was the chariot in battle. It turned into a slaughter. Now, the Romans, all we have is Roman. This whole story I'm bringing you is nothing but the Roman side of it. So it's amazing that like we even know this much, and that the Celts got as much props as they did from the Roman historians. But supposedly, the Romans lost like 3,000 to 5,000 guys out of the 10,000. Okay, that they had. Out of the 80,000 Celts, 80,000 Celts got murdered. Somehow, Boudicca got away, and she ended up poisoning herself before the Romans got to her. But from that point on, pretty much the resistance was over. Britain itself. Now, not all of the British Isles, because what's now Wales, that remains Celtic. No, far north, when what is now Scotland, that remains Celtic, and Ireland is the fly in the amber. The Romans never got to Ireland; they never touched it, and it always remained Celtic. But what we now call, and also Cornwall, like Wales, it was so far west that remained Celtic speaking, Celtic governed. But what's now pretty much this country of England, that was Roman. That was Roman Britain. There was everything about it. Just became another state, basically, of the Roman Empire. So I'm going to end the show there. Today was my longest show. It was also the most notation I did, but that has a lot to do with the fact that I had a desk to work with today. I'm not like walking to a bus. I'm not like pulling this shit out of my ass. I'm actually had some equipment to work with. I want to, for any of you who sat through all 33 minutes of this, I want to thank you. But now you know more shit. You know more about history. Have a great New Year's. I'm going to be back later on today with a couple more shows about the East Side. My name is Richie Romance, and this is The World According to Romance. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please, I don't get any props at all on Facebook. I get props on YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment, holler at your boy. World According to Romance. The Celts Part 6. Invasion of Britain. Hopefully tomorrow, the next show will be the last show on the Celts, and then we're going to move on to the Mongols and a couple of requests that I have to do. Peace.